think is really important here, and that is the adoption of new techniques and technology. And apparently the Coast Guard in its adoption process is slow to adopt. And the questions that I would like to get to really are the organizational structures that would retard the adoption of new technologies, new techniques, equipment, and so forth. Let's start with the budget for the development, testing, and evaluation program. I think you're requesting like $17.2 million, which is 47% less. Why? And if this particular budget or line item is critical in the adoption of new techniques, technologies, and equipment, why the reduction? Or maybe this isn't where the problem lies. Could we just go into that for a few moments?
Our R&D budget has been fairly consistent over the years. I'm wondering if you're talking about the 47% because of the $18 million plus up for the long-range UAS. We've been operating around $18 million for the last several years for the R&D budget, and that gets us where we need to go. It would obviously be better if we had more, but we find ways of getting around that by leveraging the other entities out there who have done some of this work. One of the things we're trying to prevent ourselves doing is recreating the wheel, duplicating efforts done by others. And so one of the things we do is we partner with the national laboratories, the Naval Research Lab. We just recently got into an agreement with the Air Force, first of its kind, to leverage some of the stuff they're working with, working with science and technology. So we do these things to kind of augment that and make up for,
Well, all well and good. The notion of working with other agencies and using their knowledge and testing, excellent. How then does that get into the operations of the Coast Guard? How do you transition that information? I'm looking at the organizational structure. There's something here that isn't working smoothly. Technologies are readily available, techniques, but the Coast Guard isn't adopting them. As the chairman was driving into this, what is it in this organizational structure that is retarding the integration of these new systems into the Coast Guard's daily operations? If it's not this RDT&E, apparently that's not important, and you're able to make up for the less money by utilizing other agencies. Then that information, that knowledge from other agencies has to find its way into the Coast Guard. How does it get there? How is it acquired?
There are a number of ways we do this. One of the things we've tried to do recently is we're trying to spur more innovation within the service. So we've stood up an innovation council, which has senior leaders here at headquarters that are engaged in R&D, RDT&E efforts to provide guidance and oversight. We have created a crowdsourcing platform that has gotten great use over the last year or so, where we basically allow folks at all levels in the organization, from military, civilian, young new sailors, all the way up to senior officers, can all provide input on various topics that we put in the crowdsourcing platform. That allows us to get new ideas to go after. The second thing we do is we use that information to create a portfolio of things we believe are the best return on investment for the Coast Guard. Since I arrived in CG9 last spring, one of the things I've asked the Research and Development Center to do is place a greater emphasis on the actual transition of the research and development efforts into products that the operational Coast Guard can use. And so now our folks up there are, when they do this, they also look at, okay, what's the next step in the process? How do we go about putting this into the operational user's hands in the Coast Guard?
Can you develop and deliver to the committee a portfolio, the word you used, of ideas, products, techniques, technologies that are currently being looked at by your organization. Something is amiss here. The adoption and the openness to new ideas. Like, how does an individual from, I don't know, say Scripps, who has developed a great sensing device that could be used on one of your ships, get to your office so that you can acquire that knowledge, that technique? In other words, is your door open?
Yes, sir. The
And
door
how
is
many-
definitely open, and we are excited about opportunities to do this sort of thing.
There's a whole series of questions. I can go on for some time here about this. We sense that there is a slowness, a reticence within the Coast Guard to adopt new techniques, new technologies, new equipment. The chairman gave, I don't know, 3 different examples a moment ago. What is it about the organization that is retarding the acquisition of these new systems? Just for example, we know that the offshore patrol cutters are someday going to get out there. In the meantime, we have ancient equipment that is not terribly reliable. What are we doing in the intervening period to use these new systems to understand the domain, the maritime domain? Are you open to that?
We are open to that.
And what are you doing in your openness?
Well, part of it is we need to know that it exists. And that's one of the key roles our Research and Development Center plays, is getting out there and finding out what sort of technology exists. So the folks at the R&D Center are constantly on the prowl. They are out there visiting folks. They are doing research online. They're attending conventions. They're having meetings with the technology centers, things of that nature. So we're aware of those capabilities. The next step after you've been made aware of this, you got to prioritize it and make sure that you're using your resources for those things that bring the best value to the operator out in the field. We have a process for that, and that process starts usually at the end of the summer. We get input from the field, and then we later in the winter we actually bring people together. Usually we get an external look, someone from Naval Research Lab, S&T, the chief scientist for DHS. We'll bring all these senior folks into the room, and we'll go through all these projects in detail to determine which ones make the most sense for the Coast Guard to go after. And then we put that portfolio together, and then that is the marching orders for the R&D Center, and they go out and they go after this.
Your title is Commandant for Acquisition and Chief Acquisition Officer. And I know this committee puts a lot of pressure on you with things like icebreakers and other major pieces of equipment. I think we're going to we're putting more pressure on you about these other systems, not the big ones, but all of the systems that make the icebreaker more effective, more efficient. The offshore patrol cutters, more effective, more efficient. And these are not the big flashy things, but these are UASs, other devices that expand the ability of the Coast Guard to carry out its many, many tasks. And so just since you have such broad shoulders, in addition to the major acquisitions and the recapitalizations that are underway, these other things, my question really goes, and my issue really goes to the organizational structure that provides the open door for these systems to be brought to the Coast Guard and then implemented along the way. So I'm going to drive at that. Right now, I think I've taken much more time than I would otherwise have available. But the specific question, how could the Coast Guard improve its interactions with the new technology, the blue technology industries and firms sufficient to keep the Coast Guard abreast of the latest development and innovations? So this is an organizational question for which I'll be driving. I suspect the committee will drive to. So thank you very much for that. Yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Mr. Graves from Louisiana is recognized.
Admiral, thank you for being here. I want